This work of fiction is intended for mature audiences. It contains themes of psychological horror and violence presented in a restrained manner. All characters and events are entirely fictional. The narrative is not intended to glorify or encourage harmful behavior.
The planet of Myros had once been a perfect paradise, a lush green world brimming with abundant life. Its vast forests stretched endlessly, canopies thick with towering trees that filtered the sunlight, casting an array of shadows over rich soil teeming life and nutrients. Rivers ran through the valleys, nourishing the land and providing clear water that was as much a part of the landscape as the trees themselves. The Myrosians, an intelligent and peaceful species, had thrived for millennia within this ecosystem, cultivating crops in harmony with nature. They lived solely off the bounty of the planet's vegetation, embracing a complete vegetarian lifestyle that reflected their deep respect for the land and all its creatures. The peaceful nature of their society was upheld by the Environmental Preservation Authority, EPA, an organization dedicated to the stewardship of Myros' delicate balance throughout the planet. At the helm of the EPA was Serene Kilknot, a strong, compassionate leader who had spent her life safeguarding the planet's resources. As head of the EPA, she was the protector of Myros' biodiversity, ensuring that farming practices were sustainable and that the natural world flourished without interference from outside forces. Her role was vital, and her work was driven by a profound sense of duty to her people and the planet they called home. However, one spring season, something unusual began to take root, literally. The first sign came subtly, a slight discoloration of the zucchinis. It was a minor anomaly at first, an odd shade of green creeping into the crops, something that seemed unremarkable. Serene had seen these natural shifts before, caused by seasonal changes or temporary fluctuations in the environment and the weather. The Myrosian farmers had always been able to manage these small variations in their crops. But this time, the changes didn't fade. They spread, slowly but surely, and not just in zucchinis, but in other vegetables as well. What started as a simple discoloration deepened into a troubling dark hue, a sickly shade of green that some crops, like the zucchinis, almost seemed to take on a charred, unhealthy appearance. Serene's team initially dismissed it as a seasonal oddity, but as weeks passed, the problem worsened. The once flourishing crops began to emit a sickly odor, strong and pungent, like something rotting. It was unlike any smell they had encountered before, even in overripe and spoiling produce. The farmers began reporting physical symptoms, headaches, dizziness, and a rash from touching the crops. At first it was isolated, but soon, reports from all over the planet started pouring in. There was something wrong with the food, the lifeblood of their society. And Serene knew immediately it wasn't a random coincidence. Desperate for answers, Serene ordered a quarantine of the affected farmlands, sending experts to examine the crops. Within days, they uncovered the truth. The crops were harboring a toxic substance that could be traced back to a mysterious virus, one that seemed to have spread rapidly through the plants. This new toxin wasn't just causing the crops to rot, it was infecting the Myrosians themselves. Consuming the affected produce led to violent allergic reactions, nausea, dizziness, and in some cases, life-threatening anaphylactic shock spread like wildfire. With no immediate cure in sight, the Myrosians found themselves toe-to-toe with a devastating crisis, a threat to their very way of life, and there was no easy solution. What began as a minor agricultural issue had grown into a full-blown epidemic, and now, Serene had no choice but to mobilize all of her resources to contain the situation before it was too late. The planet's very survival depended on it. As the crops continued to fail, Myros' way of life was unraveling at an alarming rate. The once green fields were emptying, and the Myrosians, who had never known hunger, now faced the terrifying prospect of starvation. Despite their best efforts, the toxins in the crops continued to spread unchecked, rendering the planet's primary food source useless. Serene's team of scientists worked tirelessly, but they could not isolate the virus in time to prevent its deadly wrath. It soon became clear. There was no choice left to them to survive. Myrosians would have to abandon their long-held vegetarian values and find an alternative source of nutrition, one that no one had ever considered: meat. The thought was horrifying to the entire population of Myros. For millennia, they had lived in harmony with nature, cultivating crops and caring for the animals they had seen as companions and equal sentient being. The idea of dispatching them and eating their flesh was unthinkable to many. It was a betrayal of everything they stood for and their long-held beliefs. Yet, hunger began to drive even the most reluctant to consider the unthinkable. As the first few weeks of starvation took their toll, some Myrosians, mostly those who had little to lose, began to experiment with eating the flesh of smaller, easy-to-catch creatures. Creatures they had once nurtured, small animals that had lived alongside the people, now seen as the only viable source of food source available to them. At first, it was a quiet rebellion, practiced only by those on the fringes of society. But as the crisis deepened, more and more people turned to this new source of sustenance. The demand for meat soared. What had once been considered taboo quickly became a necessity in order to survive. Myrosians began hunting and farming the creatures they had once coexisted peacefully with. These precious animals, tiny, once cherished companions, were now seen as food to be harvested. The moral dilemmas the people faced were as immediate as they were profound. Could they, in good conscience, live with the guilt of taking the lives of these living, breathing, innocent creatures? Were they justified in abandoning their deeply ingrained beliefs simply to survive? The unquenchable demand for meat led to the rise of a dangerous underground market. The local markets, which had once been limited to small trade, quickly escalated. Those with wealth and power cornered the market, creating a system where only the rich could afford to eat. Illegal hunters, called harvesters, exploited the desperate and the starving, controlling access to meat and setting exorbitant prices. And most people could not even come close to affording it. The population was divided, and the inequality between the rich and the poor grew exponentially. For some, survival meant going without food, while others ate in abundance. The situation was dire, and no one seemed to have an answer. Serene, who had always championed the peaceful, harmonious way of life on Myros, was now faced with the task of managing a society that had been thrust into chaos, brewing into civil war. The old ways were no longer enough. The Myrosians could not survive on crops alone. They were nearly gone. Serene knew that drastic action had to be taken, but she also understood that their deep connection to the planet and its creatures could not be entirely abandoned. That was unthinkable, for now. As the planet's ecosystem continued to deteriorate and the balance of nature teetered on the edge of collapse, Serene convened a council of leaders from every sector of Myros. She invited farmers, environmentalists, ethicists, and cultural representatives to meet and discuss how to restore order and create a sustainable way forward. The council was a diverse group, and tensions were high. The questions on everyone's minds were difficult and complex. How could they manage their hunting practices without depleting the already dwindling populations of animals? How could they regulate the consumption of meat while still respecting the ethical foundations of their society? Serene proposed a solution that would strike a balance, a new, regulated system for hunting and farming. Hunting would be allowed but strictly controlled, with permits issued to limit the number of animals that could be taken. Only certain species would be farmed, ensuring that the planet's biodiversity remained intact. The new system would also ensure that the most vulnerable members of society, the elderly, the children, and the sick, would have access to food, regardless of their ability to pay. It was a bold and difficult plan, and it faced fierce opposition. Some Myrosians argued that the government's intervention was too controlling, while others felt that the shift toward hunting and farming was a betrayal of their sacred connection to the land. But Serene held firm in her belief that survival, in this new era, would require cooperation and sacrifice. The planet's ecosystem could not afford to collapse further, and the people of Myros could not afford to let their moral compass disintegrate. Despite the resistance, Serene's plan gained traction. The government enacted policies to ensure fair food distribution, and environmental regulations were put in place to protect the smaller, farmed creatures. The Myrosians, though divided, slowly began to adapt to their new reality. However, just as hope was beginning to bloom, Serene uncovered something far darker. Serene began receiving troubling reports. People were vanishing. Farmers, traders, and even some of the most vulnerable Myrosians. At first, it was easy to dismiss as isolated incidents, but the disappearances began to escalate. It wasn't just the absence of individuals that troubled her. It was the fact that there seemed to be a pattern evolving. She began investigating, and soon she uncovered a terrifying truth. An underground group, known as the Harvesters, had been operating in the shadows, taking advantage of the chaos to exploit Myrosians in ways Serene could have never imagined. The Harvesters were not just illegal hunters. They created abductions on a massive scale. The Harvesters kidnapped the most vulnerable, those who had no means of defending themselves, and forced them to work in inhumane conditions. They were turned into slave laborers, working to harvest animals for profit. The meat from these creatures, especially the rare species, was sold at astronomical prices on the black market, further exacerbating the inequality that had already taken root in Myros. Serene knew that this was a battle for the soul of Myros. If left unchecked, the Harvesters would destroy what little was left of the moral fabric of their society. She called for a coordinated operation to dismantle their operations, launching unannounced raids across the planet to expose the Harvesters and free the helpless captives. It was dangerous work, but with the support of the EPA and worldwide law enforcement, the Harvesters were eventually rounded up and brought to justice. Though the immediate threat was neutralized, Serene knew the war against corruption would continue. The real battle was against the exploitation of the vulnerable, and the road to rebuilding Myros would be long and fraught with obstacles. In the aftermath of the Harvesters' downfall, Serene's leadership became a beacon of hope. The people of Myros, though weary and scarred by the challenges they had faced, began to rally around the idea of rebuilding their fragile way of life. Serene called for a planetary summit, a gathering of the planet's leaders to discuss Myros' future and how to emerge from the crisis stronger than ever before. The summit was broadcast across the entire planet, and Myrosians from every corner of the world tuned in. The message was clear. Survival alone was not enough. Myros would rebuild not just by surviving, but by thriving in a way that honored their past while embracing the new reality. The summit focused on the importance of unity, cooperation, and the need to preserve the planet's biodiversity. With a new governing body established, Myros began to take the first steps toward a more sustainable future for all life on their planet. The road ahead would not be easy, but Serene remained hopeful. She knew that, despite the hardships they had faced, the Myrosians had the strength and the wisdom to create a world where harmony with nature could be restored, one that would adapt to change, but never lose sight of the core values that had always defined them. In the end, Myrosians learned that survival meant open to and embracing change, but not at the cost of everything they held dear. The planet had changed, and so had they. but they would always find a way to adapt, thrive, and prosper. Together, they would create a new, uplifting reality, one that would carry them through this recent dark time and into the light of love.
Hello, my Nightmare Obsession fans. We hope you loved this story, and were almost frightened to death, left wanting even more. If so, please share video and our channel link with friends and family, and ask them to subscribe, like, comment, and share with their friends and family too. We really want to create more nightmarish horror stories for you, so please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel now. We would really appreciate it. Thanks so much.